Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Device Talks Weekly. Before we get started, I want to let you know that in our next episode, I'll have some details for you about a new program we're rolling out at Device Talks. It's going to be an excellent opportunity for you not only to hear from the leaders of the space, but to engage with leaders in the space and to do it from the comfort of your office/home, wherever you're getting the job done. We want to bring Device Talks to you. So stay tuned and look forward to telling you more. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to Device Talks Weekly. It's great to have you here. And it's great to be on the line with my partner in crime, my partner in podcasting, Chris Newmarker of MassDevice. Chris, how's it going today?
Hey, doing well. Great to be back.
It's great to have another opportunity to tell some great medtech stories. We're speaking today with Aaron Tucker over at the University of Minnesota about their Coventor ventilator. We'll get into that interview in a little bit, but I know you folks are busy over there at MassDevice. I mean, this is the first or second week of April. You're looking at a lot of quarterly earnings coming down the pike. This is going to be an interesting one to watch, given obviously all that's transpired over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of many medical device companies at this point have now said, like, 2020 guidance out of the window. Who knows what's going to happen. Obviously, like, losses, they're always each of them are always saying, like, like that they're looking at a decent amount of revenue losses, from all of this. So, as we get these Q1 earnings coming down, we'll get a better idea of just what, like, the beginning of the pandemic was doing to medical device company revenues and earnings. So it'll be really interesting to follow as this comes down.
So, Chris, let's give our listeners a little sort of insight on how you folks are handling earnings. I mean, you basically are taking the news as it comes. You're getting it out quickly on the Mass device. I mean, how big of a part of your life is the earnings season at Mass device?
Oh, I mean that. I mean, it's just crucial with what MassDevice does. That, I mean, we're trying to get the earnings news out as quickly as possible. Especially for the major companies. I mean, we're talking here on Thursday, and just today we had Abbott earnings out this morning, and it's they beat the street on their first quarter, but they're suspending their 2020 guidance because who knows what's going to happen with everything. Abbott's doing a lot of exciting stuff related to fighting the coronavirus pandemic, and including especially when it comes to tests for the virus. In fact, Abbott, just the other day said they're releasing, they're going to get like millions of antibody tests out, which is a big deal because, I mean, an antibody test can tell whether someone has had the virus in the past and recovered, and they really are they're really the best way to to figure out, like, how widespread was this pandemic, how much of the population has had it, and hopefully has some kind of immunity to it. As our policymakers try to decide, like, how to get this country reopened. So, I mean, they're doing a lot, but at the same time, they're in the same boat as a lot of other medical device companies. They the fact that elective procedures not really happening right now, as hospitals are trying to deal with the pandemic. Even procedures that people need, really, but including, like, heart devices, stuff for stroke, that's that might not be happening. I saw it especially disturbing column in the New York Times a week or so ago from a Yale professor who was saying that hospitals are eerily quiet when it comes to heart attack patients and stroke patients coming in, which kind of suggests that people might be having symptoms and not going to the hospital right now. I mean, that's terrifying, but and that affects the the revenue and profits of major cardio device companies, because they're not their devices aren't going into people right now.
Hey everyone, Tom here. I'm going to take this quick break from this conversation with Chris. One thing I want to do with this podcast is sort of bring some of the earnings comments to you. So this week we're going to hear from Robert Ford. He's the new CEO of Abbott. He had a call with analysts last week, and I just took a few comments. I thought some of the highlights of the conversation. It was really interesting. Thought some great Q&A with the analysts and some good points of view on where Abbott is heading and perhaps where the sector is heading. But overall, Abbott did fairly well in the first quarter. It showed 4.3% organic growth and $7.7 billion in revenue. So given all that's gone on, not a bad quarter for Abbott. And of course, Abbott's been at the forefront of developing new tests, new diagnostic tests for COVID-19. It has 3 tests currently out on the market: ID Now, which is more of a point-of-care test; MD2000, which is done in laboratories, and it recently gained approval for its serology test. So we'll be able to test for those critical antibodies. Pulling this comment from Robert Ford just to give you a sense of how Abbott approached this task of developing these diagnostics. Let's listen.
So in mid-February, when we saw that the virus was not going to mimic what we had seen in maybe previous viruses like a SARS or a MERS, for example, and we saw that this was going to be something much more significant, much more widespread, we assembled 4 different and independent R&D teams to go about it in individual groups. I mean, there was obviously some collaboration between them, but we wanted them standalone going after 4 different types of tests, say a molecular lab test, a molecular point-of-care test, a lab-based serology test, and a lateral flow serology test. And we did that not because we thought that we needed 4 shots on goal here to try and get 1 or 2 of them to get it. We understood, given our experience here, that all 4 of these tests, all 4 of these different types of testing would be needed. All 4 of them had a different value proposition. So if you look at the lab-based systems, they're more high throughput, get a lot of tests done. There's a little bit of a turnaround time there, 1, 2, 3 days, etc. But we knew we needed that kind of testing volume. We also knew that we needed faster, immediate results, maybe with the notion of having some portability where you'd be able to take the test straight to testing people and not having to restrict them to having to go to a lab or a hospital. And we also knew that there was going to be a need for mass volume screening. So when we look at the assembly of these 4 different tests that we've been working on, that was the goal, to understand that there's a viral progression that occurs where in the beginning, in the early stages, you need molecular testing to be able to diagnose if somebody has the virus, and as the degrees progresses and people start to build antibodies for that, you're going to need a different type of test and in different formats of the test. So I would say every single one of our programs here either met or beat their target dates. And there's probably 2 reasons for that. One of them is, I'd say, just a very passionate and committed scientific and manufacturing team here that really went 24/7. I mean, one of our teams split in 2 so they could go 24 hours a day, 10 days a week to be able to continue the work and doing the work. So that's one key driver. And I'd say the other one here, and we've talked a bit about this, is a very collaborative, science-based approach of our work with the FDA. Throughout every step of our development process, we worked real time with the FDA, sharing them our technology, sharing how we're going to do the clinical, sharing with them the results, taking input and feedback from them on a real-time basis. And I think the combination of those 2 factors really allowed us to do this, at least these 3 tests here in record time.
One thing I wanted to add about Abbott is that I did try to get a spokesperson from Abbott on the program to talk about their success with diagnostics, but understandably, they're very busy. So I'm glad we were able to bring Robert Ford's comments to you. As I said, there was some great exchanges between Robert Ford and the analysts. And in this clip, Robert Ford gives his forecast as to where Abbott and maybe where the healthcare sector is headed and when we may see a rebound. Let's hear what he has to say.
So if I look at this data, and we've looked at it various different ways, we've run a lot of different forecast models and sensitivities here. There's a couple things that I can see ahead of us here, right? The first one is Q2 will likely be our toughest quarter in the year, especially I would say for our core lab business and our cardio and neuro businesses. This will probably be our toughest quarter for those. And I think our consumer businesses will continue to perform at the trends and dynamics that I had just explained. The second thing that we can see here, based on our modeling, based on the data that we're seeing from that we're collecting on a daily basis, is that we can see a recovery into Q3 and into Q4, especially for these more elective procedures. There are some that you can push out, but they are important. They are life-saving. They are solving some significant problems, whether it's a stent, a pacemaker, repairing a mitral valve. We will see those start to come back the same way that we started to see in some of the earlier markets that have kind of that they are further along in the recovery. I don't believe that they're going to come back at the same speed that they came down. But like I said, these are important procedures, and I do see them coming back. I've talked to a lot of health systems, a lot of CEOs from health systems, and they are already talking about how they are planning to start to work with some of those elective procedures. It'll be a V-shaped. I don't think it'll be I think the right-hand side of that V-shape will be definitely a little less steeper than the left-hand side of that V-shape. But I think we're going to see that recovery in Q3 and Q4. At least that's what our data is suggesting.
Right. Well, I hope you enjoyed those comments from Robert Ford. I thought the call was interesting. And we'll try to bring you some more comments from earnings calls as they come out. And next, I'm excited to welcome Danielle Kirsh to the podcast. Danielle is a senior editor at WTWH Media. She works for MassDevice and MDO, and she manages a lot, in addition to writing a lot of our stories and a lot of our more popular stories. She also manages a lot of our bigger projects, including our new Medtech 100 index. So I'm going to talk to Danielle about that index. It's a great new tool for any of you who are tracking the goings on the public markets, the ability of the large companies to sort of compensate with what's happening with COVID-19. It's a great tool. You should definitely check it out. You can find it both on MassDevice and our medical design and outsourcing websites. Now let's hear from Danielle. Well, Danielle Kirsh, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You are a senior editor of life sciences at WTWH Media. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been here?
So I've been with the company since around December 2016, and I basically just do a lot of reporting on financial information and anything that comes through the newswire.
And big projects as well. I know we're going to talk a bit about the index in a moment, but the origin of that, if I'm right, is the Big 100 list that you work on every year. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that project and what information it delivers?
Right. So the Big 100 list is put together each year around September. But throughout the year, I go through literally over 100 annual reports from some publicly traded medical device companies. And in that list, we report on annual revenue, research and development expenses, employee headcount, and the patient MassDevice team then goes through all those numbers when it comes crunch time to put it into print. They make sure that, there's no discrepancies. Everyone goes through each annual report, make sure we got the right numbers. And that includes companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and all the big medical device companies that you can think of.
I'm curious, you've been covering MedTech for a few years now. You obviously are doing a great job in getting to really know the sector, especially through the diligent research you're doing on the Big 100. The pandemic has been a real change of pace, and I think it's the first one that a lot of people, especially people who are somewhat newer to the industry, the first big disruption to how things are going. I wonder how are you sort of taking all of this in, sort of it's a global change. It's a big seismic change. It's seismic for even folks who have been covering this for a decade or two, like myself. How are you sort of reading the landscape during this pandemic?
Right. So It's been really interesting to see what's going on because every day when you log in and see that all these companies, Abbott, Medtronic, usually they'll be releasing products that aren't related to COVID-19, but now it's just we've seen an influx from everybody. Everybody's doing a test, everybody's trying to make a vaccine, and there's not a lot of device news that I've seen recently just because I feel like everyone's just dropping everything to focus on this one thing because it is such a big deal right now. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I see right now.
That's a great point. And as I said, I know this has been compared to 9/11 and to the recession in 2008, but this is really the first global emergency that medtech companies can have a direct hand in going after and improving testing and improving treatments and providing the equipment that's necessary. So really has been something. You're right, to see everyone sort of pull together and push forward. To that point, the index is a great project that I think you've spearheaded, and I know you've had a lot of help in it. But let's talk a little bit about how that came together and what folks can what information can folks pull from all that hard work that everyone has been putting into the MedTech index.
The Medtech 100 index is basically just a crib off of our annual Big 100 list to keep track of the stock performance of some of the biggest medical device companies in the world. And some of the things you can find in there are the market cap, what their stock is at the end of the day, even minute by minute for some of the US based companies. But it's literally like any other stock index that you'll find online. But it's just the stocks of the top companies in the world.
And it'll change day to day because I know we're here at earnings month. We're going to get a lot of Q1 earnings, and this has been a really challenging quarter for a lot of companies with the move away from certain surgeries that aren't COVID related. Do you anticipate sort of those numbers changing frequently, and recommend people come back and keep an eye on that index?
Right, yeah, for sure. The index is really, I think, a big deal for us because we do report on the quarterly reports every year. It's earnings season, as we like to call it, and usually we use other websites to look at the stock performance. But the stock performance is really important when those earning reports come out. So I think the index is really a good judge for how all these companies are doing right now.
Well, thanks, Danielle, for joining us. And just so our listeners know, there was a bit of a technical difficulty right at the end. Our thank yous and goodbyes were cut off, but goodbyes aren't really necessary because Danielle and other members of the Mass Device and MDO teams will be regular parts of this podcast. Next, I want to introduce our guest of the week. Aaron Tucker is a lab supervisor and technical development coordinator at the University of Minnesota Earl Bakken Medical Devices Center. As you all know, last week, the center gained FDA approval for its Coventor ventilator, which is a genius way of turning an ambu bag into a ventilator, sort of a last line of defense for the sickest of COVID-19 patients. And more interestingly, Boston Scientific agreed to manufacture them at cost. So it was a great opportunity to learn a little more about how folks are stepping up to aid in medtech innovation and medtech development. Let's hear from Aaron Tucker. Aaron Tucker, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So this is quite an amazing story, the Coventor ventilator, and even made even more remarkable with the news this week that Boston Scientific will be working with you to develop these ventilators and make them available at cost. So I wanted to have you take us back sort of the very beginning. What was the conversation that, you know what, we can develop a ventilator that could help fill this need?
Yeah, so 31 days ago now, so exactly a month, Dr. Richardson had this idea to use a readily available bag valve mask, commonly known as an AMBU bag. It's a brand name. And he had the idea to use these, which are commonly used as mechanical hand ventilators all across the country. He had the idea to use them as a means of alternate ventilation in case we run out of ventilators. So if a patient goes to a hospital and all of the ventilators are taken up, the only other option the patient has is to have a nurse or, God forbid, a loved one actually ventilate that patient by hand using one of these bags. And this bag just forces air in and out of the patient.
So this is the bag you've seen where someone's squeezing it and sending air into the lungs?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so he had this idea to just basically create what we call a one-armed robot and replace a person who would have to ventilate a person by hand. So this, of course, frees up nurses, but it's more likely that in such dire need that it would be a loved one, and there's all kinds of extra dangers associated with that, including the loved one getting the virus themselves, or falling asleep, or not being able to maintain consistent ventilation. So that was where the idea came from. And then he quickly put together a first generation prototype with his friend Jim McGurn from MGC Diagnostics. It's a local company here. And once they had that first generation built, they knew they needed to make some design changes. They had built it out of what they had readily available. It was very non ideal. So at that point was when he came to us, which was on the 15th of March, I believe. Yeah, so he came to us. He said, "Okay, we need this extra engineering expertise." And here at the Bakken Medical Devices Center, we specialize in early stage prototyping and product development. So that's my job here. I'm the technical development coordinator at the Bakken Medical Devices Center. So this is what I do every day. And from there, within 2 weeks, we had turned around 5 new versions of the prototype, and we had done, I think, 6 different tests of various types to ensure that this would perform as expected and would perform properly in a clinical setting.
And what was your initial response to the approach? Was it, yes, this is definitely something we can do, or was it, well, wait a minute, this seems far beyond what we're really here for?
Yeah, no, my initial response was that this is very simple. I mean, our design, I don't know if you've seen it, it's a slider crank mechanism. It has exactly 3 moving parts. So it's a dead simple mechanism, 100 years old. People have been doing these things for decades on end now. And so once I saw that the design had to be as simple as that, then for me it was pretty straightforward from there.
So if the design is simple, is the reason that this hasn't been done by others just because there hasn't been the need there has been before? It's fascinating to me that we've got a space within medtech, the ventilator space, that really hasn't seen, I think, a great deal of innovation compared to other areas, at least. And now that demand is there, where there's ideas coming up, even simple ones like this one that are arising and that are helping to again fill these needs.
Yeah, so I guess to be clear, we are not trying to replace the high end ventilators that you can buy. I mean, those things are very well designed, they work extremely well, they have all kinds of fantastic feedback that the clinician gets. They tell you uh, different pressures and different ratios for the inspiration versus expiration, and they're very, very reliable. Um, and and we're in such a unique time right now that we didn't think that they could build those high-end ventilators fast enough. So the reason that we built this is in case you just simply, even if you had the money to buy a high-end ventilator, it may be impossible to even acquire one. So we wanted to give another option in case of dire need. So we're certainly not trying to replace the high-end ones. This is kind of a bridge until you can get a better ventilator.
That's a great point. So, what was the process like from the moment where the concept was presented to today? How many people were involved in that process? What were the discussions like and the design process like?
Yeah, so we quickly went through kind of our screening process here at the Bakken Medical Devices Center, and so I was the lead engineer on the university side, and so what we did was we quickly determined, what are the things that need to be done on this, what needs to be improved from the initial prototype, what kind of testing would be relevant and meaningful to get this device approved by the FDA, and what does the timeline look like, and what do we need to mass produce these? So we are not a mass production facility here at the U, but we have tons and tons of contacts in the local Minnesota community, such as Boston Scientific, who are able to mass produce these. So our whole goal was we had to get this ventilator to a point where a company could confidently come in and say, all right, now we can make this, and we know that it works, and we know that it's going to be reliable and efficient, and they would have the ability to produce this in mass.
How did then Boston Scientific enter the picture? Was this something that you had shopped around to different OEMs, or did they come to you?
So they I don't even know. They kind of came to us because of our very close relationship. So we have other projects that we have ongoing with Boston Scientific. We have a great relationship with Randy Schistel, who's the VP of R&D, I believe, at their company, and he's a close friend to our center director. So we were in talks with them pretty early on, and they knew that what we were doing, and it was kind of just a matter of them being confident that we had the testing down and the reliability that they would need to make it themselves.
Finally, what does this is a really unique experience for someone entering the medtech space or someone in the medtech space. What does this experience say to you and to others at the university just about the opportunities for design and innovation and working within the medtech industry? It's an industry that's really been called upon to rise and meet a whole bunch of previously unforeseen challenges.
Yeah, so I guess I'll answer this in a slightly different way than you expected. But here at the Earl Bakken Medical Devices Center, we have a process which we believe is unique across the country. We believe that we know how to properly innovate within the medical device space. It's something that we've been doing for years now. And by applying this process to a problem such as this, we were able to quickly come up with a viable solution. So pretty much this is what I do normally when there's not a global pandemic. So it was nice to be able to apply this to a different situation and know that we still had the correct process and that we were still able to arrive at our goals in a timely manner.
Do you have any next projects lined up?
Oh yeah, I've got plenty of those. I have projects in peritoneal dialysis, and I have a project in ECMO, and then I also have my PhD research. So it's definitely a busy time around here, even when there's not COVID going on.
Excellent. Well, excellent work on this to you and to everyone involved. And thanks for taking some time on the podcast. I have a feeling we'll be talking to you again sometime in the future.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's been great being here.
So we heard from Aaron Tucker. Interesting news over at the University of Minnesota. You being a Minnesota guy, I'm sure that that's pleasant for you to hear that all the great stuff they're doing over there at the Earl Bakken School.
Really exciting. It speaks to the strength of the medical device cluster here in Minnesota as well, because not only Boston Scientific has a huge presence here. They worked with the University of Minnesota on this, and now they're going to be the sole manufacturer. But you had just a whole host of kind of like contract manufacturers and others in the region that were helping with that effort. So it just shows how many companies and people we have working on medical devices around the Twin Cities.
Absolutely. And we talked with Danielle about the Medtech 100. I know you're really excited about having this tool available to MassDevice readers. Is it being well received? Are people finding it and enjoying it?
Hey, we're starting to get page views. We're starting to get interest for it. I think it's a really neat tool. Especially all the work that Danielle has done on our Big 100, really figuring out who are the world's largest medical device companies, what's their revenue, employee numbers, R&D spend, and now we've also our technical team here at WTWH Media has worked with Danielle to put together this index that kind of it gives a nice indication of how's the industry doing. I can look at it right now and kind of see that the industry is the stocks of the large companies are kind of reacting to everything that's happened, kind of the way the overall market is. The shape of our index is very similar to the S&P 500, which kind of shows that you'd think you hear about all these big contracts and all these device companies trying to do stuff to fight the pandemic, but as I mentioned before, they're still kind of stuck with all these problems around elective procedures, and so the markets are kind of saying you're facing your own troubles too.
And the Big 100 is coming out later this year, right?
Yep, coming out later this year, just so we can try to get a few more annual reports that that end in the fall, into the mix for the Big 100. So in the past, it ran that issue of MDO came out in September, and we had all kinds of articles getting thrown up on MDO and MassDevice off of it. And now we're going to be having that come out in November this year.
It's going to be an interesting one to see. It always is, but just given the impact of the pandemic, of course, to see how companies fared. How can folks get a hold of the of last year's Big 100? Is that still available?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you go to medical design and outsourcing, we've got a nice little thing on the right bar of the website where you can look at digital versions of our past print editions. Take a look at our September print edition, and you could also just look up articles like the 20 largest medical device companies in the world. And you can see, that's like just one piece of content we do off of the Big 100 on our websites that you could check out.
Terrific. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, Chris Newmarker, how can we reach you via email and social media?
Hey, you can reach me at cnewmarker, just like a new marker, at WTWHmedia.com. And I'm on Twitter at Newmarker, and I'm on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat with our audience.
Excellent. And I'm on Twitter at MedTech Tom. I'm on LinkedIn as Tom Salemi. And you, of course, can reach me similarly at tsalemi at WTWHmedia.com. And we'll wrap up this episode of Device Talks Weekly. Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to this so you'll get future episodes sent directly to your listening device. Tell your friends, share it on social media, include Chris and I in those conversations so we can hear what you're talking about or see what you're talking about. And thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Everyone stay safe and healthy.